The vibration started soft against the wood, a frantic insect trapped on my nightstand. The screen glowed 3:07 a.m., an hour that only carries bad news, the kind that shatters the quiet. The number was unknown, but the area code was a ghost from my daily life, a familiar sequence that made my stomach drop. I answered, my voice thick with sleep, a question mark in the dark. Eliza? Her voice was a strained wire, nothing like the polished, confident tone she used in meetings. It was Mara. I'm sorry, I know what time it is. A sharp intake of breath, the sound of someone trying to hold themselves together. I need to talk about her. The line went quiet then, just the faint static of the connection and her shaky breathing. My own heartbeat was a heavy, physical thing, thudding against my ribs like it wanted out. Victoria's name hung in the air between us, a physical weight pressing down on my chest in the dark. I was suddenly back in her office 2 years ago, the blinds half closed against the afternoon sun, the way she'd look at me over the rim of her glasses, a small, private smile that felt like a secret just for us. We did this careful dance for months, all sharp professionalism and strategic insights under the fluorescent lights, a performance for everyone else. But after hours, it was something else entirely. Lingering in the parking garage, conversations that stretched past their natural end, the way her hand would brush mine when she handed me a file. It was a language built on glances and almost touches. And then it ended. Not with a conversation, not with an explanation. It ended with her promotion to senior partner and a sudden glacial distance that froze me out completely. The unspoken rule was established the day she moved into the corner office. We don't talk about what happened between us. Then Mara arrived. Young, brilliant, hungry. Victoria's new protege. Her current favorite. I watched their partnership form from my desk. A quiet agony blooming in my chest every time Victoria's laugh echoed from her office, every time I saw them leaving together for a late dinner. A mirror of a past I was forced to forget. Mara had everything I'd lost, and I hated myself for the bitterness that curdled inside me, for the way I couldn't stop watching. Her voice broke through the silence, thin and frayed. She's doing it again. The words were a dam breaking. The details spilled out of her, a torrent of late nights that bled into early mornings, of an intense focus that felt like being under a microscope and a spotlight all at once. She talked about the subtle manipulations, the way Victoria would praise an idea in private only to gently dismantle it in the next team meeting, leaving you scrambling to win back her approval. She makes you feel like you're the most important person in the world, Mara whispered, and I could hear the tears she was fighting back. She listens like no one has ever listened to you before. You start telling her things you've never told anyone, and you feel seen, really seen, for the first time. A long, shaky pause filled the line. Until you don't, the warmth just shuts off, like a switch, and you're left in the cold, wondering what you did wrong, scrambling to find the version of yourself she approved of. The pattern was so familiar, it was a physical ache. The private projects, the whispered compliments that felt like secrets, the sudden cold withdrawal that left you questioning your own sanity. Mara's voice grew steadier, hardened by a new, grim realization. I found some old project archives last week, the Henderson account. Your name was all over the initial strategy, the one that made her career. I read your notes, your emails with her. Her breath hitched. She said the same things to you, didn't she? Your insight is unparalleled. This is why I trust you with this. The dawning horror in her voice was a reflection of my own. Our stories weren't just similar. They were identical. The darkness of my apartment felt suddenly too small, the walls pressing in. The phone was warm against my ear, a tangible connection to this shared nightmare. My own memories surfaced, vicious and clear, things I had neatly boxed away and labeled as necessary lessons in professional growth. The scent of her perfume, something expensive and floral, was suddenly vivid, as if she'd just walked through the room. I could feel the ghost of her hand on my shoulder during those late nights, a possessive weight that had once felt like belonging. I remembered the exact texture of the wool blend of her suit jacket under my fingertips, the way my heart would slam against my ribs when she leaned in close to look at my screen, how it felt to be chosen by her. A heady, terrifying privilege. And then, the discard, the professional corpse I became in her eyes, my value suddenly expired. Mara's voice cut through the memory, quiet and terrified. "I'm scared I'm becoming you," she said. The words hung in the air between us, a devastating confession and a silent question. The shift happened in the space of that silence. The professional jealousy, the quiet rivalry I'd nursed for months, it evaporated. What was left was just the raw truth of what Victoria had done to both of us. Mara's vulnerability had shattered the last of my own armor. I was no longer looking at Victoria's new favorite. I was looking at her next victim. My next words came out before I could second-guess them, my voice softer than it had been all night. "Do you want to come over? We shouldn't talk about this on the phone." Her hesitation was a palpable thing over the line. I could picture her, sitting in her own dark apartment, weighing the risk of trusting me against the terror of being alone with this. Then, a rush of relief in her voice. "Yes, please." I gave her my address, and the 20-minute wait began. I paced my apartment, the hardwood floors cool under my bare feet. What was I stepping back into? I was inviting a piece of that world, a living reminder of my greatest professional and personal failure, into the one space I had control over. The knock, when it came, was softer than I expected, hesitant. I opened the door, and she looked younger than her 28 years. Her professional armor, the tailored blazer, the crisp slacks, looked absurdly out of place at 3:45 in the morning. She clutched her laptop bag to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. All the tears fought back for now. We just looked at each other for a long moment, and a shared understanding passed between us without a single word. All the office politics, the unspoken competition, it fell away. We were just two women in the middle of the night, broken by the same person. I gestured for her to come inside. She stepped over the threshold, and I closed the door behind her. The silence in my living room felt different now, charged and waiting. She didn't wait for an invitation. Mara moved through my living room with a purpose that belied her tired eyes, settling at my small kitchen table. The laptop bag unzipped with a sharp sound in the quiet. The glow of the screen illuminated our faces in the dark, carving out hollows under our eyes, making everything feel more stark, more real. She didn't speak, just pulled up files, her fingers flying over the keys with a nervous energy. Email threads, project notes, draft performance reviews, a digital trail of Victoria's particular brand of manipulation. She turned the screen toward me. "Read this." It was an email from Victoria to Mara, sent just 2 weeks ago. "Your perspective on the client's core hesitation was masterful, Mara. It's this kind of unique potential that sets you apart from everyone else on the floor." The air left my lungs. I knew that phrase. It was a ghost from my own inbox. Mara clicked to another file, a project outline with Victoria's comments in the margins. "Push harder here. I know you have more to give. I expect excellence from you." Word for word. The same pressure, the same promise of validation disguised as a demand. We sat there, in the blue light, scrolling through the evidence. The pattern was a perfect echo. The initial flood of exclusive attention, the sharing of confidential information to create false intimacy, the gradual isolation from the rest of the team with excuses about special projects, and then, always the pivot to criticism. The private doubts about your work ethic, your commitment, planted so carefully you'd never think they came from her. Mara's finger, trembling slightly, pointed to a line in a chat log. This is the one that made me call you." Victoria's message read, "Don't share this with the team yet. They wouldn't understand your vision. It's ours." Mara looked at me, her face pale. "She said the exact same thing to you, didn't she?" I had to look away from the screen, the words blurring. My throat was tight. For 2 years, I had carried this alone, treating it like a personal failure, a wound I was too ashamed to show anyone. To see it laid out like this, a calculated strategy, was both a relief and a fresh kind of horror. I found my voice, and it sounded rusty, unused for this particular truth. The first project was the Clayton merger, I began, the words feeling foreign. She brought me into her office, closed the door, told me she'd been watching me and saw something the others missed. She said she was entrusting me with it because I was the only one who could handle the subtleties. The memories came back, not as painful scars, but as clear, terrible facts. The heady feeling of being let into her inner circle. The late nights that turned into early mornings where the office was ours alone. The careful touches that seemed accidental, her hand brushing mine when she handed me a coffee, her leaning over my shoulder to point at something on the screen, her perfume enveloping me. I thought it was building to something, I admitted, the confession feeling both dangerous and necessary. I was in love with my boss, and the more painful moment was realizing she knew it. She could see it on me, and she used it. She used that hope, that need to please her, to push me further, to work me until I had nothing left to give. And then she took the credit for the Clayton merger and moved into her new office. The next Monday, she scheduled a meeting with HR to discuss my workload. She suggested I might be burning out. Mara was just watching me, her earlier panic replaced by a deep, still focus. She was connecting the dots in real time, her own experience mirroring mine with such precision it was eerie. I saw the relief first, the dawning understanding that this wasn't about some personal failing of hers. She hadn't been special, and therefore she hadn't uniquely failed. Then came the anger, a dark flush rising on her neck. Her professional composure finally cracked. "She's using us," she said, the words flat and cold. "She's just using us." The word us landed between us, solid and undeniable. It created a new bond, a shared understanding that went deeper than being colleagues. We were two women who had been manipulated by the same hands, who knew the particular intimate pain of having your ambition and your heart exploited by someone who understood exactly how to leverage both. It was a specific kind of betrayal, one that felt uniquely tailored to queer women who'd learned to be guarded, who were so unused to being seen that when it finally happened, we'd overlook every warning sign for a taste of that validation. We didn't need to say it. We both turned back to the laptop, but now we were hunters instead of victims. We started mapping it out, pulling up old organizational charts, cross-referencing project teams from the last 5 years. We identified other names, women who had been suddenly promoted onto Victoria's special projects, who had flourished for 6 or 8 months, and who had then either left the company abruptly or transferred to less visible roles, their confidence visibly shattered. Ambitious, queer women, every single one of them. Women with something to prove. Women who might have felt like outsiders elsewhere, who were so grateful for the mentorship that felt like salvation. We saw the cycle with brutal clarity. Victoria offered a lifeline, a chance to prove you belonged in the inner sanctum. She offered a version of mentorship that felt like family, like finally being let in on the secret. It was a gradual erosion of every boundary, professional, personal, emotional. And the discard was always the same. When you were no longer useful to her current ambitions, or when you became too attached, too likely to expect something real in return, the professional consequences were a key part of the control. Those who left her orbit never seemed to thrive quite the same way again. The message was clear. Her favor made you, and her displeasure could break you. I hadn't noticed the darkness fading. A thin gray light began to filter through the slats of my blinds, painting pale stripes across the kitchen table and the glowing screen. The exhaustion hit me then, a heavy weight settling deep into my bones. The adrenaline that had been fueling us for hours finally receded, leaving behind a profound weariness. I pushed back from the table and went to make coffee. The simple, familiar ritual felt grounding. The gurgle of the machine, the rich, bitter scent filling the small kitchen. I set a mug in front of Mara. She wrapped her hands around it. and I noticed they were steady now. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a grim resolve. We drank in silence for a few minutes, the warm liquid a small comfort. The decision took shape between us without a single word being spoken. We couldn't let this continue. We couldn't be the last ones. The understanding was absolute, and so was the fear that came with it. We were planning to confront a woman with immense power whose entire career was built on being impeccable, untouchable. The risk was terrifying. I watched her over the rim of my mug. We need to be smart about this. She's careful. She never puts the worst of it in writing. Mara nodded, her eyes already sharp with the same thought. We document everything from now on, she said. Every interaction, every compliment that feels like a setup, every time she isolates us from the team. We save every email, every chat log. We create a record she can't explain away as misunderstanding or professional disagreement. The strategy built itself between us over the cooling coffee, a fragile architecture of defense. We would need to find the others, the women from past years whose careers had suddenly veered off course after working closely with Victoria. We'd need to talk to them, to see if their stories matched ours, to see if they'd be willing to add their voices to a formal complaint. The risk was a cold stone in my gut. Our careers, our professional reputations, everything was on the line. Victoria was well-connected, respected. She could easily frame us as disgruntled former favorites, a petty cabal unable to handle the pressures of high-stakes work. The particular vulnerability of being queer in a corporate environment loomed large. The fear of being labeled emotional or difficult. The worry that our personal histories with her would be used to discredit us entirely. But the greater risk was doing nothing, letting her continue this cycle, finding another woman after Mara, another after that. The cost of silence was a debt we couldn't afford. We protect each other, I said. The words a quiet vow in the morning light. No private meetings with her unless the other knows. We back each other up in meetings. We create our own network. She thrives on isolation. We won't be isolated anymore. Monday morning arrived too soon, the blare of my alarm feeling like a physical assault. Walking into the office felt like stepping onto a stage for a play I hadn't rehearsed. I saw Mara at the coffee station. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. A silent check-in, and then we fell into step together without a word. It was an unspoken agreement, a new alliance visible for anyone who knew how to look. We entered the main floor together, and I felt Victoria's glance before I saw it. She was at her office door, talking to a junior analyst, but her gaze flicked between Mara and me, sharp and assessing. Curious, slightly threatened. She tested the new dynamic before lunch, calling me over to her desk. "Eliza, a word?" Her tone was all polished warmth. She gestured to a report on her screen. "Mara's analysis on the Johnson account seems a bit rushed in Section 3. I'd like you to take a look. Give her some notes. She respects your work." It was a classic move. A subtle critique of Mara's work delivered through me, an attempt to drive a wedge to reestablish the old hierarchy where we were rivals for her approval. In the past, I might have preened at the request, seen it as a return to favor. Now I just felt the cold precision of the manipulation. I kept my voice calm, neutral. I reviewed that section with her before it was submitted. The methodology is sound. It's a different approach than we used on Clayton, but the data supports it. I saw the faint surprise in her eyes before the professional mask snapped back into place. The power shift was minuscule, almost invisible, but it was there. She was used to us competing for her praise. She wasn't used to us defending each other. The resistance was built in the small, quiet ways. We started setting firm boundaries. No more late-night work sessions in her office with the door closed. If a meeting ran past 6, we made sure a third person was present. We began documenting every interaction in a shared, encrypted log. The backhanded compliment in the hallway. That presentation was surprisingly confident, Eliza. The pointed question in a team meeting meant to undermine, "Mara, are you sure you're comfortable leading this? It's quite complex." We recorded it all, noting the date, the time, the witnesses. It was Mara who found the first one. Alicia from marketing, who had transferred to a satellite office 2 years ago after leading a hugely successful campaign for Victoria. We met her for coffee after work. Her story was our story, the intense mentorship, the late nights, the feeling of being uniquely seen, followed by the sudden freeze out and a transfer that was framed as a new opportunity but felt like exile. Then we found Chloe from finance. Same pattern. A brilliant woman now working as a freelance consultant, her confidence in tatters. Our quiet network of support grew. A silent understanding passing between us in the office corridors. A look that said, I know. Me too. Victoria's frustration became a subtle current in the office. She could feel the change, the loss of control. The tactics became more overt. She tried to divide us, pulling Mara aside to suggest I was jealous of your potential, and telling me in a concerned tone that Mara seemed unstable and overly emotional about her work. But the divisions didn't hold. We compared notes after every attempt, and her strategies, once so effective, now seemed transparent and desperate. The wall we were building was made of shared experience, and she couldn't find a way through it. The summons came on a Thursday afternoon. An email from Victoria. Eliza, please come to my office at 4 p.m. I'd like to discuss your Q3 priorities. Privately. The word privately was underlined. My heart hammered, but I forwarded the email to Mara immediately with a single word. Now. At 4 p.m., I walked into her corner office. The view was still impressive, the furniture still sleek and expensive. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Close the door, please. She didn't start with Q3 priorities. She started with the past. I've been thinking a lot about the Clayton merger lately, she said, her voice soft, almost nostalgic. Those late nights we spent in the old conference room, ordering terrible takeout. You were so dedicated, so brilliant. I don't think I've ever had a connection with a team member like that. Yin, she was trying to revert to the old intimacies, to remind me of what we had, or what I thought we had, to see if that lever still worked. I kept my face neutral, my hands folded in my lap. It was a very successful project for the firm, I said, my tone carefully professional. Her smile tightened. She leaned forward and her voice dropped, losing its warmth. I'm concerned about the influence you're having on Mara. She's developing a rather negative attitude, a resistance to feedback. It's a shame. She had such promise. The threat was there, implied in her perfectly reasonable tone. Fall in line or her career suffers. I met her gaze directly, my own voice calm and quiet. Mara is an exceptional analyst. Her work speaks for itself. Victoria's eyes narrowed, her patience evaporating. Her anger surfaced then, sharp and cold. I know what you're doing, Eliza. This little alliance. I've seen it before. It never ends well for anyone involved. I didn't look away. I let the silence hang for a beat, let her hear the emptiness of her own threat. Then I said it, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm not the only one who knows the pattern, Victoria. The fear flashed in her eyes then, a raw, startled thing before the polished mask slammed back down. But it was enough. I had seen it. She knew. The balance in the room, the balance of our entire history, shifted irrevocably in that moment. The understanding was absolute. The game was over. Weeks passed in a state of tense truce. The air in the office didn't just change. It became a different element altogether. The constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that Victoria used to conduct like an orchestra simply vanished. She maintained a careful, immaculate professional distance with all of us. Her interactions reduced to necessary emails and brief, public directives. The warmth was gone, but so was the manipulation. The absence of her intense focus felt like stepping out of a too-hot room into cold, clear air. It was disorienting, but it was honest. Mara's confidence didn't just return, it evolved. It was no longer the brittle, performative confidence Victoria had cultivated in her favorites. It was quieter, steadier, rooted in her own work and the unshakable knowledge that she wasn't alone. Our coffees together in the break room shifted in nature. They were no longer emergency meetings, frantic strategy sessions for survival. They were just coffee. We talked about our weekends, about bad movies, about the frustratingly slow office printer. The connection that had been forged in shared trauma began to knit itself into the ordinary fabric of a real friendship. The understanding was a quiet, solid thing between us. We had looked into the same abyss and had chosen to stand together instead of letting it swallow us, one by one. We had protected each other when the system designed to protect us had failed. That knowledge created a bond that felt more permanent than any professional mentorship, any fleeting office alliance. It was a pact made in the dark, and it held fast in the light. The phone doesn't scare me at 3 a.m. anymore. Its ring is just a sound, not a portent. If this story found something true for you, a familiar shape in the dark, hit subscribe. Tell me in the comments about the quiet alliances that saved you, the hands you held in the silence when no one else was looking. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, its subject line bland and unthreatening. Q4 strategy alignment, your input needed. But the meeting request was for her office, alone, at 4:30 p.m. The hour was deliberate, late enough that most of the floor would be empty, the cleaning crew already humming in the distance. A private audience. My stomach tightened, a familiar old dread I'd thought I'd shed. I forwarded it to Mara. Her reply was instant, just 3 words. I'll be nearby. Walking toward her office felt like moving through water, every step a conscious effort. The door was ajar, as it always was for these summons, an illusion of openness. She was at her desk, but not working. She was staring out at the city skyline, the fading afternoon light painting her profile in golden shadow. She turned as I entered, that practiced, polished smile already in place. It didn't reach her eyes. They were assessing. Cool. Eliza, close the door, please. Her voice was smooth, a low command. I did as she asked, the click of the latch sounding final. I took the seat opposite her, the same one I'd sat in 2 years ago when she'd handed me the Clayton file, when her gaze had felt like a reward. Now it felt like a surgical instrument. She didn't speak immediately, letting the silence stretch, a tactic I knew well. She was waiting for me to fill it with nervous chatter, to offer up some vulnerability she could use. You've been doing excellent work lately, she began, leaning back in her chair. It was the oldest opening in her playbook. Praise first. Always. Praise first. The board was very impressed with your presentation last week. I made sure they knew you were one of my top picks for the leadership program. The hook. The promise. The reminder that my success was still tied to her favor. I simply nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Thank you. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the edges. My lack of effusive gratitude was a misstep in her script. She leaned forward, elbows on the polished desk, her hands steepled. I've also noticed you've become quite the mentor to Mara. Her tone was light, conversational, but the word mentor was pointed. It's admirable, really. Though I have to admit, I'm a little concerned it might be distracting her. She seems less focused on her core deliverables, more interested in collaboration. She let the word hang, laced with a subtle disdain implying gossip and wasted time instead of partnership. This was the pivot, the gentle critique disguised as concern, the attempt to isolate, to make her target doubt their allies. I could feel the old impulse to placate her, to assure her of my primary loyalty, to throw Mara gently under the bus, to save my own standing. The fear was a cold thread in my veins, but it was followed by a stronger, steadier current, the memory of Mara's laptop glowing in my dark kitchen, the shared log of manipulations, the quiet vow we'd made over coffee. I disagree, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. Mara's work has never been sharper. Our collaboration on the Thompson account uncovered 3 major risks the initial analysis missed. I'd say it's made us both more focused, not less. I held her gaze, refusing to look away. The veneer of pleasant concern evaporated from her face. Her eyes went flat, her expression hardening into something much more familiar to me. Impatience, laced with contempt for having her narrative challenged. This little alliance you're forming, she said, the words dropping all pretense of warmth. I've seen it before. It never ends well. It creates division. It breeds a pack mentality that is toxic to a high-performance culture. She stood up then, turning her back to me to look out the window again, a classic power move. You of all people should know how quickly favor can turn, Eliza. You had everything within your grasp once. Don't let misplaced loyalties make you lose your footing again. The threat was chi luode, naked. A direct reminder of my own discard, a warning that it could happen again, worse this time. I stood up as well. The decision was a physical thing, a settling in my spine. I would not be seated while she loomed. My loyalties aren't misplaced, Victoria. I used her name, a deliberate shift from the respectful you I'd always used. They're just no longer exclusively with you. She turned slowly, her face a mask of cold fury. The carefully constructed image of the supportive mentor was gone, completely stripped away. What was left was the real her, calculating, angry, and cornered. You think you're the first to try this? She hissed, her voice low and venomous. You think a few whispered conversations in the break room amounts to a revolution? I built this department. I know every single thing that happens on this floor. She took a step toward me, and for a terrifying second, I thought I saw something unraveling behind her eyes, a frantic, panicked energy. You will regret this. Both of you. I will make sure your professional reputations reflect the petty, gossipy women you've chosen to become. The air crackled with the ugliness of it. This was the core of her, the truth she hid behind glass offices and tailored suits. It was almost a relief to see it finally out in the open, to have the shadow given form. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet in the room was absolute. It's not just whispers, I said, my tone even, factual. And it's not just us. I let the words sit there. Alicia Chen sends her regards. So does Chloe Davis. I watched the names land, watched the blood drain from her face. The fear I'd seen a flash of before was now a stark, unmasked reality in her expression. She knew. She knew we had spoken to the others. We had the pattern, and we had the witnesses. Her power, which had always relied on our isolation and silence, was evaporating in the space between us. She said nothing. She couldn't. The mask was not just cracked, it was shattered at her feet. The balance of power, which had been tilted in her favor for so long, had not just shifted, it had overturned completely. I had seen the fear in her eyes, and she had seen that I was not afraid to show her I'd seen it. I didn't wait for a dismissal. I turned and left her office, closing the door softly behind me. The click of the latch was the same sound, but it felt entirely different. It wasn't a trap closing. It was a prison opening. I walked back to my desk on steady legs, the frantic hammering of my heart, the only sign of the war that had just been fought and won in the quiet of a corner office. Weeks turned into a tense, watchful peace. The office air felt clearer, lighter, as if a storm had finally passed and left a washed clean silence in its wake. Victoria's presence became a careful, distant thing. Her office door, once a revolving entrance for her chosen few, stayed mostly closed. Our interactions were reduced to necessary. Brief emails, her tone impeccably professional and utterly empty. The absence of her intense focus was a relief so profound it felt like learning to breathe a new kind of air. Mara and I didn't need to speak of it. Our alliance, born in a 3 a.m. panic, solidified into a quiet, steady friendship. The frantic evidence gathering ceased. We no longer hunched over screens in the dark. We just worked. Our confidence no longer something doled out as a reward for compliance, but something we built for ourselves, together. The understanding between us was a solid, quiet thing. We had faced the same monster and chosen to stand back to back instead of being picked off one by one. We had protected each other when the structures meant to protect us had failed. That knowledge was our real victory. The phone doesn't scare me at 3 a.m. anymore. Its ring is just a sound, not a portent. If this story found something true for you, a familiar shape in the dark, hit subscribe. Tell me in the comments about the quiet alliances that saved you, the hands you held in the silence when no one else was looking.